Indiana in the room, Middletown, Connecticut, Marshfield, Columbus, Ohio, North Carolina, Michigan. Everybody is, it was Chattanooga. That's fun. Everybody is coming in so fast, I can't actually see how fast they're coming. Of course, it doesn't help that I left my glasses down by the water. Pittsburgh. Oh my God, I had such a good time in Pittsburgh. What a fabulous museum you have there. The art museum is the one I saw. That Jackson Pollock, that is spectacular. I mean, the whole collection is great, but that Jackson Pollock, I took a picture of it. I've been looking at it every day since. Canada, Austin, Texas, Dayton, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan. You people in the Midwest are nervous there in those swing states, aren't you? Port Huron, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I can't see that went by too fast. Anyway, so we're already up to 1,500. So, I hate to screw around. Oh, my glasses are in my pocket. That helps a lot. Wow, that's much better. All right. So I'm going to get right down to some stuff that I want to tell you today, and then I hope we'll answer some of your questions. And I want to start as people file in with a way to think about the way I think about the world, which you might find comforting in this moment. In my mind, I have three manila envelopes, not envelopes, folders, three manila folders in my mind, and they have labels. And those labels are these: NMP, NMDB, and NMC and MM. And what those labels stand for is not my problem, none of my damn business, and not my circus, not my monkeys. And what I find is that any problem that comes at me, I put into one of those three files if I can. And if I can't, it is my problem. It is my damn business, and it is my circus and my monkeys. So one of the things that really jumps out about the questions you have asked me today is many people are concerned about whether or not the House of Representatives and the Senate together in their joint session on January 6th will be able to get through the certified ballots, or even whether the ballots will be certified in the states. Because remember, the electoral votes are certified in the states. People often talk about Congress certifying them. Congress does not certify them. The states certify them. They go to the National Archivist. The National Archivist makes a record of them. And then the joint session of Congress, at the joint session of Congress, the vice president, who is the head of the Senate, technically, is the one who opens them and counts them, but we already know what's in them. And at that point, they can be challenged, which is rare, or at least it was until 2021. But that's the way the system is supposed to work. And lots of people are really concerned that it's not going to happen that way. And here's what I would say. Unless you are an election lawyer or a member of the state governments in which you live, that goes into NMP, not my problem. And by not my problem, I don't mean it couldn't affect you. I mean that there's no action that you personally can take to affect what happens there. So, for example, if I'm giving a lecture and the audio goes out, that goes into not my problem. As in, I can't fix that. I'm not an audio engineer. Anything that I can do will make the problem worse. If I start yelling at the audio person, they'll get flustered. They won't be able to fix it. That goes into not my problem, but it creates what is my problem. And what is my problem in that case is figuring out how to make sure an audience continues to stay with the program if we lose the audio. I can start delaying for a bit, telling some jokes that people in the front can hear. I can figure out if there's other ways to project my voice. I can figure out if we can reschedule. I can do all that is my problem. But the audio is not my problem. So in this case, unless you have some way to fix the problem itself of certification, that's not your problem. And I would not lose sleep over it. Your problem is making sure we don't get to that point. That's a very different problem. So the thing to be focused on right now for people who are freaking out is not what could happen, because that is utterly contingent. You're borrowing trouble if you do that. That's in the not your problem category. What you want to focus on is things you can affect today. And the things that you can affect today are making sure people turn out to vote. And if you are, working for that, great. You can sit on your couch and do it through the Rally tool, RALLY, that Red, Wine, and Blue has available on their website. They can walk you through it, enables you to actually text your friends who have not voted. It'll let you know who hasn't voted. Text your friends who haven't voted and give them the information about where their polling place is. It's a great tool. So turning people out is one thing, and protecting the guardrails of democracy is the other. So should that happen in days down the road where there's a problem with counting or with certification, that's when you speak up, you make it clear that you care about the rules and the guardrails of democracy. But that's in the future. That's not, there's plenty to worry about. There is plenty to worry about in this world without borrowing things to worry about in the future. So that's, I would say, for all of you who are like, what are we going to do if this happens? That goes in the not my problem file, as in there's nothing that you and I can do about that right now. What is our problem is making sure it doesn't come to that. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about where we are right now, because of course tomorrow is the 2024 presidential election and all the down ballot votes that go with that. Really important to remember to vote down ballot so that things like I just laid out in the states doesn't happen. You want to have strong characters in office who believe in the rule of law. And that's at the state level is overwhelmingly important, not only in the state governments, but also in the state judicial races. So tomorrow is the election, and there are polls out, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the polls again, and then I'm going to tell you what I watch. I am not a pollster, so the expertise that I bring to this is not in the polls. My expertise that I bring to this is how people are reacting to the polls, which is a different thing. So one of the things we know going into this election is that right-wing pollsters have flooded the zone, if you will, with polls that are skewed to the right. And that we just know, and good pollsters are trying to weed those out. I mean, that's why you're hearing stuff all the time. All these polls, Trump's way up. This is going on, that's going on. That is designed not to reflect what is actually happening. That is designed to skew the way people are thinking about this race. They're trying to make people think Trump is winning, either because it will depress Democratic turnout or because it will make it more possible for them to contest the election after it happens. So there are those polls out there, and a lot of you have asked me to talk about the Seltzer poll out of Iowa. Was it just yesterday? I can't even remember. Recently, that shows Harris doing very well in Iowa, up 3 points, I think, but also that 2 of the congressional seats in Iowa, Seltzer says, are going to go Democratic, which is a shift from where Iowa has been in the past. But remember that our electoral system got really skewed really fast after 2010. So when people go, oh my God, Iowa's a red state, well, yeah, but that's not of huge long standing. There's an awful lot of stuff in flex here. So I'm not as gobsmacked as everybody else is by that. Still, that's only one poll. There are other polls out this afternoon also showing Harris doing very well. I didn't give any weight to the polls that said that Trump was doing very well. I'm not going to give any weight to the polls that say that Harris is doing well. I have my own opinions about which one of those seem to me to be more real, and I will tell you why that is. But sitting there and looking at the polls again we're all trying to divine what's going to happen over the next several days. We all want an answer desperately, and so I think we're looking for any tea leaves we can find, and that's human nature. But I'm not sure that is going to bring any clarity to a race that virtually everybody will tell you is very, very close. All right. All that being said, let me tell you what I look at and what I am looking at. And remember, I'm not looking at this as a political scientist. And maybe some. I read political science. I'm not trained as a political scientist, but I read political science. But I'm certainly not looking at this as a pollster because I am not nearly sophisticated enough to make accurate judgments about the way that the pollsters work. If you want that, the man to look for is Tom Bonier. I've said this a million times. He is on, I follow him on X, Twitter. I'm sure he's elsewhere, but he's very good about saying, let's take a look at what things matter. And he's very into new registrations this year. He thinks those are extremely high for the Democrats, and there's a lot that you can tell from the early vote. So let me tell you. Let me write down. I'm going to tell you about the early vote. Let me tell you what I am looking for in trying to divine what is going to happen tomorrow. And please, if you possibly can, try and think about this with me, not as in, because I'm trying to calm you down here, not as in, oh my God, this is happening to us right now, but as in, if you're looking back at this moment from 100 years, what are you looking at? What are you looking for? Are you looking at Twitter and the people fighting on Twitter, which falls into not my circus, not my monkeys? No, that's all, that won't even be remembered in 100 years. What are you looking at? You are looking at, I am going to start by looking at, I'm writing down something else here. I'm going to start personally by looking at how principals are acting. How are the people who are running the campaigns acting? How are the people who are running for office acting? And how are people responding to those actions? All right, so let's start with former President Trump. He is mentally breaking down. I'm not a doctor, but I do not see how you can look at that in his behavior in any other way. And by that, I mean his inability to put sentences together, his clear falling off at night, his returning frequently to statements that he has said before because they're comfortable. You will see this in people who give a lot of speeches. They have their set things they say. Kamala Harris has them. I have them. He has his set phrases, and he does not seem to be able to build around them anymore. He goes right from one to another. He's not very coherent. But most of all, you see, I think, his penchant for violence is coming to the fore, and his inhibitions are gone. The fact that he performed a sex act on, I am still gobsmacked by that. And the things that he has been willing to say on the podium they're just inappropriate. They're really just inappropriate. And in a way that he would not have done in 2020. He said many things in 2020, but the lack of inhibitions now is a real sign of mental deterioration. I would also suggest that there is, I guess I'll stick with the Trump side for now. There is in his increase of calls for violence, and there are increased calls for violence. He's gone beyond what I think he was aiming for, which was to turn out men to vote, and has gone into revenge fantasies, which suggests that he is not planning to win. He does not think he is winning. That's how I read it. And that is, I think, important. He's showing up late to his rallies, really late to his rallies. He's always been late to his rallies. Now, some of them he's not even bothering to show up to. The one I'm thinking about, the one that he was due to give in Midwest. I'm sorry, I don't remember. Oh, yes, I remember. Traverse City, Michigan. I remember because I was there. Thank you very much, Traverse City. You make fabulous cherry jam. So Trump is not looking good. And the rallies are another key thing to look at, I think. Nobody's going. He is not filling stadiums. He's not filling venues. And here's another key piece of the Trump campaign. He doesn't have surrogates. He doesn't have people who are out there willing to speak for him, which give him far more coverage. So the only person who's really speaking for the Trump campaign now is Elon Musk, who puts his foot in his mouth every time he speaks, and JD Vance, ditto, right? So that's meaning that they can't cover a lot of territory because there just aren't surrogates. Now, that also, the way that they have managed the campaign is also deeply problematic. as in, if you think about the way you win an election, it's by turning out voters. And the Trump campaign pretty clearly didn't want to bother to turn out voters. In part, I think, because they recognized that women were going to be a real long shot. So they were hoping simply to hold the women they had. And they decided to focus on turning out low propensity white men. And first of all, that's not a population that tends to vote very much. But second of all, as Rachel Bitecofer, is a political scientist and a very good one, said today, deciding that your electoral strategy is to turn out low propensity white male voters during football season is a decision, but perhaps not a good one. In any case, the way that elections are won is by turning out voters. And we know that voters like democratic policies. We know that Democratic policies are very popular. Republican policies are not, except among a very small portion of white evangelical voters and neo-Nazis, but they're not actually that big a group. So we know that if in fact you get people to turn out, they tend to vote in pretty significant numbers for Democrats. All right, so let's look at what the Trump campaign has done to turn people out. They, as soon as Trump took over the Republican National Committee and put his daughter-in-law and a loyalist, Michael Whatley, in charge of it, they cut all the funding for the get out the vote effort, the GOTV effort, GOTV effort, the get out the vote effort. That is, the way you get people to vote is you call them and you knock on their doors and you hold meetings and you organize, you get people out to vote. And the Republicans were already in trouble with that because the people who are the most effective of that are women, especially older women. And older women were pissed off at the Republicans for getting rid of Roe versus Wade, for which, many women had worked very, very hard, especially older women, and recognized they did not want to go back to a time before that. So they already were hemorrhaging women over the abortion issue. And then they simply cut the funding for it and instead took that funding to pay Trump's legal bills and to fund their attempts to challenge the election. And try and win by challenging the election, by essentially getting votes thrown out, making it harder for people to vote, doing all the things that would make it so that they could win on those grounds. But what that means now is that Republicans are not voting in the numbers that Democrats are. And that's a huge problem. If you can't turn around without running into somebody trying to get the Democrats out. And there's just no comparable effort on the Republican side. I know people who've said they've had their door knocked on 4 or 5, 6 times by Democrats, which they will stop doing the minute you vote, which is one of the reasons you vote early. But they haven't had a single Republican knock on their door. That really matters. Okay, so if you're looking at that, at all those things going on, there are also some other really interesting signs that the Republicans are not content with where they are right now. And the one that really jumped out to me, and you can read it, is Tim Alberta, who is a fabulous writer. I loved his last book, which unfortunately I can't remember the title of because it's very similar to the previous book, which was also good. He is I think he's an evangelical still, but he was raised as an evangelical and has a really keen eye for political trends and for the role of the evangelical community in those political trends. Anyway, Tim Alberta is a staff writer for The Atlantic, and he wrote a piece. And again, I've completely lost track of time. I think it came out yesterday. It might have been the day before, in which he essentially has had as sources the co-directors of Trump's campaign, and Chris LaCivita and Susan Wiles, and Susie, I guess she goes by Susie Wiles, and the whole thing basically is an attempt to say it's not our fault when he loses. And there's a bunch of people they throw under the bus, and it basically ends on this really kind of, I think, weird is one of the words I would use, but also frustrating note, in that basically at the end of it they say, we're done. We don't care if he wins or loses. We're done. We want out of here. We've hated this, the worst thing we've ever done, and we're miserable, and we want to get out. To which my response is, then why don't you get out now and tell the rest of the people this, which I suppose they thought they did by giving it to Tim Alberta and putting it in The Atlantic. But But I look at that, all the things that I just told you as a historian, and I say, that doesn't look like a winning campaign to me. And again, 50-50. I'm actually trying to be very careful not to say anything about predictions, because anything I say could have the wrong effect. It could make people say, "Oh, I don't feel like voting," or "Oh, I'm too scared to vote." And I don't want to do that. I just want to try and calm your fears a little bit and tell you what I am looking at, okay? And I'm going to end with this. The game tomorrow remains the same. Run to the tape. God knows I ran to the tape and am running to the tape. And I feel good about that. And you want to feel the same way on November 6th. So we're still going to get out there. We're going to do everything we possibly can tomorrow and going forward. But I'm feeling like I'm in a kind of funny place because I hope I said everything I had to say last night. I'm terrified about writing tonight. I don't quite know how to play it so that I don't cause trouble. Anyway, so if that's what I'm looking at on the Trump side, and the number of times Trump has talked about, well, it's been good, but now it's over. That to me does not look like a winning campaign. Now let's look at the Harris-Walz campaign. So again, as if I'm looking at this in 50 years. So the handoff from Biden to Harris was flawless. And I have to say, I'm sort of, I have questions for people. Most of what I have questions about are things one can find in the public record. So I don't have secret sources or anything. I don't want secret sources because I want to know what the public knows. But I got to tell you, I would love to have one last crack at another Biden interview so I can ask him about that handoff, because that was a perfect handoff to Kamala Harris. And that you don't get that good a handoff without some pretty serious thought going into it. And I would love to know more about that thought going into it. Anyway, the handoff was great. And then she took his campaign in an entirely new direction. So she walked aside from the legacy media and instead went to where the people are. And I think that showed extraordinary political savvy, and it was a much better job than she did when she ran in 2020 or 2019 or whatever it was. But I don't think it was just political savvy. I think that she has very, her people, or together with her people, have really grappled with a changing world, if you will, a changing media landscape and a changing demographic. So this really hit me, when she basically ignored the New York Times for all its screaming and wailing about how she had to do an interview and all that, and the legacy media complaining that she had to come talk to them. And it was very clear at that point she was doing something else. I'd seen that Biden was doing that, but I thought Biden was doing it in part because he's always kind of been an outsider, weirdly, because he's from, a working class background, Catholic, which really, some of you who are not as old as I am might not remember, that really mattered when he was a kid. In a way, I don't think it matters so much anymore. And so I thought that was kind of his personal background, that he was building a coalition outside of the centers of power. I think in her case, she's inheriting that, but I think in her case, it really is a different concept of American democracy, which I find fascinating. She very deliberately has gone to where the people are. And when she did that podcast with Call Her Daddy, that to me was, it was a very deliberate thing because she was reaching out to younger women, but it was also a very deliberate recognition of the fact that the centers of media power and popular opinion have changed. And they've changed not only because of demographic changes, but also I think because of the pandemic. I actually really think the pandemic mattered when you think about how to reach people. Because look at us here. For years, I'm actually not bad about technology. For all that I'm not great about many things, I'm pretty good about technology. And I had wanted to learn to do this sort of thing for years. I'd been a real early proponent of online learning and all kinds of stuff, but I never quite found the time. I was always gonna take a class in it, never got around to it. Well, I'm telling you, when I heard, and I was following because I was writing the letters, when I heard about, it was actually one of my readers who wrote to me and talked about the fact that the bodybuilding expo in, I think it's Columbus, Ohio, had shut down. And the person said, this is a really big deal. And of course, I'd never even heard of that. But I recognized that if people were, if I think it was Columbus, was shutting down that big an event, that this disease was a really big deal. And that was on I learned that over the weekend, and on um, I think it was Monday, whatever it was. I know what it was. It was on Monday, and I knew something big was going to happen. I taught Monday and Wednesday. And so on Wednesday, I told my students that we were going to meet virtually, that we had the technology to do it. I did not know how to do it, but by Wednesday we all had to figure it out. So I spent all Tuesday with, learning, talking to tech people, figuring out how to do it. So I actually taught an early class on that Wednesday. And then that Wednesday afternoon, now that I'd learned all the ropes, um, the university closed for, I think it was 2 weeks. And everybody was panicked, but I'd learned how to do it. And the whole reason that I say this is because I came to Maine, and that's when I started doing these videos. If you remember, many of you were on that ground floor. The first one is me literally on the phone with my tech person going, what? What? I'm on, And I think that ability now to use technology to cross demographic boundaries and to introduce more people into democracy is a sea change. And it's a sea change that I'm not sure people have grappled with accurately yet. I think the Harris campaign did, and recognized that it was going to be more powerful to have shorts online, the short, like the one from oh crap, what's his name? The one who was the former wrestler and actor, and he did a 1 minute thing of why Trump is a wimp. Somebody will put it in the chat. I don't remember who that is, and I should. I'm sorry. Anyway, I think they recognize that, and their campaign has been freaking flawless. And they recognized as well that the way to undermine Trump was to meet him where he was, to psych him out, to treat it the same way he was, like a worldwide wrestling event, and to troll him online and to make fun of those things before the debate where they had in Philadelphia, the pretzels on I wrote about this, but they had signs, billboards around Philadelphia they were all locally based, of a full-size pretzel and then a little pretzel, a little piece of a pretzel, like a little upside down U, that said, in Philadelphia, size matters. I mean, they did stuff like that, and they got under his skin, and they have made him do one unforced error after another. All right, so if they have run a better campaign than Trump, here's the other thing that you would look at, to me, in this, is her events, which I'm not going to call rallies, because I think they're actually something different than what Trump has done. Her events, again, have been flawless. They have trolled Trump when she accepted the nomination from the Democratic National Convention. It is common for the person to be in place. Instead, she had surrogates there. She was on the Jumbotron, and she accepted it. I believe it was the same hall where Trump had the Republican National Convention. So she had twice the size of people he had. And the Democratic National Convention was again flawless. So the first night went too long, but otherwise the next 3 nights were and it's a celebration. They were just absolutely incredible. And the numbers, I think, that you see at her events show that. People who are trying to defend Trump now are saying, well, his rallies are so small because everybody's already voted and they're not turning out anymore. Well, then the same should be true of Harris, right? And people are lining up at 6 a.m. for 6 o'clock in the evening events. They're packed to the gills. They are, people are rushing to see her, and showing extraordinary enthusiasm for doing that. So if I'm trying to do parallels between the two campaigns. The other piece is the get out the vote effort. I have never seen a get out the vote effort like we are seeing now. And I want to be very clear that, I saw a piece today saying, well, that Harris and Walz had done this. And I don't think that it was just Harrison Walls. Biden had been very aggressive about having a very good ground game when he was running. They picked that up, they grew it. But I think it's people like us. I really think it's people like us and people like Red Wine and Blue with Katie Paris and people who listen to the Suburban Woman Project and, all these people who have been out there and all the groups they've had, Heather's Herds and all those people that are out there doing the work day to day, quietly, and many of them are older white women who are invisible. And the reason I say white women there is because Black women have always been on board the Democrats. They have always been the base. It's the white women who have gone for Trump. And the white women who have gone for Trump are not the ones in the North who have tend to go about 4% for Democrats, which is still pretty low compared to Black women, and Hispanic women too, by the way. But it's the South. The white women in the South have gone for Republicans in the past by a huge number. I want to say it's 23%, but I could be wrong about that. It's a lot. They have been organizing, and those white women are really going to matter in this election. And if you look at the number of door knockers and phone bankers and callers that are out there now, I have never seen a ground game like this. I have never seen a ground game like this. Now, in times before elections, there have been these sorts of movements in our past, both on the left and on the right, but they have not organized like this before an election. They have been sort of in between elections, and they have been sort of thought of as different kinds of movements. But this is how movements happen. They happen on the ground among individuals who say to their neighbor, I'm not okay with X, and therefore we're going to change things, and they build movements. So if those are the two campaigns, it's a little hard for me to imagine that they are still running neck and neck. But let me tell you why I think that is. Aside from all the polls and aside from whether or not that is a correct reading and all that, the Trump campaign and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, who at this point almost are a threesome, right? You have to assume, by the way, that Trump is not going to be in charge of his administration. He is mentally not okay. People keep asking me about the 25th Amendment, and I'm like, who cares? That he seems to me to be very easy to manipulate to move off stage and simply be the ones who sign the bills. I think that will be, if I were J.D. Vance, that's what I would do. But I think you have to assume that Trump will not really be the one in charge of his administration, except to the degree that he's able to use his anger and vitriol to go after his own personal enemies. I think that will happen. But I think the immigration program that Stephen Miller gets in charge of, Trump's the one who's going to sign off on it. And J.D. Vance is, of course, going to dismantle the American government. That's very clear. So what that group is offering is this. They are offering to take the United States government. And first of all, Musk has been very clear he wants to crash the economy. And that Trump will be part of, wittingly or not, with these tariffs he keeps talking about. Because tariffs, and this is just so astonishing to me, he still maintains he doesn't understand this. Tariffs are paid by the American consumer. They are not paid by foreign countries. They are paid by the American consumer. So if he puts his tariffs on, and if they do begin the process of trying to deport, they're talking now 20 million people, and they are now saying that they will decide who is here legally and who is not. It's going to be chaos. And undocumented immigrants to this country make up, I believe it's half the number of people who work in agriculture and especially milk for some reason. And please don't write to me about that. I'm writing about immigration, and I will know the answer to that. And I just can't read a whole bunch of emails about milk tonight. Dairy cattle. But they also make up more than half of the workers in a number of the building trades. So imagine not only just ripping those away, but making people who are adjacent to that, afraid. That's not a recipe for continuing the kind of economic growth we've got. So they're talking about destroying the economy. Oh, and with part of the idea behind this is to collapse the dollar and theoretically pay off our debt cheaper, but that's absolutely not the way it will work. That's a tech bro fantasy, and that's not the way it will work. And of course, Musk's all behind the idea, and so is Don Jr. of turning America into a cryptocurrency supporter. And this is not a thing. This is not going to work. What they're really trying to do is get rid of the American state, and the reason that they want to get rid of that from the tech bro side is because they don't like regulations. They don't like the regulations that they feel stop them from being able to do the things that they could otherwise do. And they don't like Musk anyway, and Peter Thiel has written about this, don't like the regulations and the laws that talk about making sure that hiring is fair with women and people of color, because they maintain that slows down their ability to innovate. People like me say that's crap, that they got that exactly backward, but they want to get rid of those regulations. And they've said so. This is, if you're interested, Peter Thiel writes a lot about this. Elon Musk writes a lot about this. They want to get rid of, the tech bros want to get rid of that. But the people like J.D. Vance want to get rid of the American state because they believe that its secular focus on treating everybody as equal before the law has weakened Christian patriarchy. And what I mean by that is that by requiring LGBTQ plus people to be recognized as having equal rights, women to be recognized as having equal rights, minority Americans, either by race or by ethnicity or by religion, as having equal rights, has weakened Christian patriarchy, and that in order to make America pure again and make it into the Christian nation that they insist inaccurately it was originally, never a Christian nation, that they have to get rid of the state that requires those things to be protected. And J.D. Vance has been very clear about that. I've posted a number of times his clip from 2021, right when he was converting to radical Catholicism, that says we have to be now he doesn't use the word brutal. We have to, and he doesn't use the word aggressive. We have to be, it's a word like that though, in the exercise of power. We have to get rid of the secular nature of our government. Now, in order to do that, you can see this in Project 2025, they want to get rid of the nonpartisan civil service, which is sort of the ballast that gets the work of the government done, and make all the workers loyal to the one president. They want to get rid of the nonpartisan nature of the Department of Justice so that it answers again to an autocrat. And they want to get rid of the independent military and make all the people in the military loyal to the president. What that is an authoritarian. That's a dictator. So that's what they are offering, along with the Christian laws that they will put in place nationally along with that. No abortion, the idea that companies have to react to their moral values rather than to markets, and all the Christian laws that go along with that. And they want to get rid of NATO and the guardrails across the world and align America with other dictators, not with the rule of law. And that is, this is one of the things that kind of makes my head explode, because if you're trying to protect the economy, you cannot get rid of the rule of law, because among other things, that's what protects the freedom of the seas, which is how container ships come and go. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than they would like to think it is. And I do want to make the point that not all billionaires and not all tech people are on this side, because the smart ones recognize they need the rule of law. And they are supporting, people like Mark Cuban are supporting Kamala Harris because they recognize that they need that rule of law to continue to have global trade. And, as somebody said, if you don't like the rules that America and Brussels have laid down, Europe have laid down, just wait till you try the rules that China and Russia lays down, because America is now on their side. And quite literally, if they're running everything, they could simply say, you think supply chains are bad now? We don't feel like letting our ships go to you. We don't feel like doing this for the next year. See how you feel with no products from China. That is a possibility. And again, I just think the MAGAs have not thought that far through. Now they're offering that. We know it is unpopular. The Democrats, on the other hand, are offering something that's really interesting. I mean, many popular, very popular actual policies, which I'll tell you about in a second. But what Harris has done, and I've been watching her really closely for a while, back, during the term as vice president. And when she was there, her work as vice president always seemed to me to be an attempt to protect the rule, to protect the idea that people should be treated equally before the law. She was the first principal to go down to Tennessee when the Tennessee legislature kicked out the Tennessee Three. She has been all over this country at college campuses talking about abortion rights. She has been all over talking about gun safety legislation. She's been doing that equality before the law stuff in a really big way. And I really thought that was where her presidential campaign would go, but it wasn't. It's there as a bedrock, I think. But what she did, when she took the nomination, was she walked away from identity politics, which has tended to shape Democratic politics for a while, very, very deliberately. And you could see this at the Democratic National Convention when everybody was wearing white for the suffragists, and she wore black. She was not going to get up there and say, vote for me because I will be the first woman president. She got up there and she talked about community. She talked about everybody being in this together. She talked about how much she had in common with her vice presidential running mate, Tim Walz, who's an older white man. And that was a really interesting decision to bring him on the ticket as well, because Walz, for all that people now consider him a progressive Democrat, the language and the laws that he has signed into place as the governor of Minnesota are Republican in nature. They are very much in keeping with the Midwestern Republican values of the 20th century, right up until really the 1980s, even into the 1990s in some places. And by bringing that into the ticket, I actually was reading today, tomorrow is the anniversary of the day that Eisenhower was elected in 1952. And were I to write tonight, like I say, I might just post a picture because I'm really afraid of spoiling the well in some way. In many ways, Eisenhower, who's a Republican, by the way, Eisenhower's platform looks so much like Harrison Walz, what the platform that they are putting forward. I mean, it's really a little bit uncanny, actually. And there's a little bit of a tweak in foreign affairs, but it's really not, it's really a different step for the modern Democratic Party. And so within that, they have been really quite aggressive about saying to Republicans who don't want the MAGA formula, come to us. We are open to new ideas. We want to do stuff that works. We want to do stuff that's the best for everyone. And come along over here, because we're not going to call you stupid. We're not going to say the things that Donald Trump said about Nikki Haley supporters. Come on over here, because over here, we want to do the popular stuff. We want to protect abortion rights because people are dying from the lack of them. We want common sense gun safety legislation because, again, children are dying. And those are extraordinarily popular measures, by the way. Both of those things. This is not walking uphill. The vast majority of Americans want those two things. We want to protect the climate. Here's a news flash. Even if you don't want to call it climate change, you want to protect that because you want to protect the country from that because we're in real trouble. And here's a news flash. Joe Biden proved that brings jobs to America. We want to protect the system that Biden put in place to protect the American economy. That is by investing in ordinary people rather than in the very wealthy, which in the 1980s, the Reagan Revolution promised us would create extraordinary job growth, and it didn't. So we're going to do this, which, newsflash, has created great job growth. And we're going to do things, Harris says, that are going to bring down costs for ordinary Americans. And while you're seeing the flashy stuff, the help for first-time home buyers, the child tax credit, the the building of more affordable housing, all of those, the tax cuts for startup businesses. You're seeing all that. You're also maybe not aware of the little things that Lena Khan has done at the head of the Federal Trade Commission. So, getting rid of the junk fees, being able to unsubscribe from things easily, the getting rid of, being able to negotiate for drug prices. Those things are bringing down costs for ordinary Americans. And that's popular. That's really popular. I just have to say, I've not written about this yet, but I can't miss it. I don't know if you saw this, but the FTC just a couple days ago has a new rule that McDonald's franchises can repair their own ice cream machines. Like, I hate to say it, but I'm so glad about that. Like, I can't, we have a McDonald's within 20 minutes of where I live, maybe 25, but we don't have like that ice cream. Otherwise, you got to drive, honest to God, 45 minutes. And there was one day last year when Buddy and I just wanted ice cream, and we drove for like 2 hours, and we never got ice cream. And when he was in the Navy, he was a mechanic, and he actually knows how to fix those machines. And he's like, it's not hard to fix them. But McDonald's didn't have the right to repair. Now, thanks to the FTC, they have the right to repair. And next year, when we want an ice cream, it looks like we might be able to get one. So that's what the Democrats are offering. And those things are popular. They are popular among virtually all Americans, right? So why is the election so close? And I would argue that the election is so close because, first of all, disinformation has convinced a lot of people that of a world that is not real. And, they don't know, for example, that all but one, and that would be Nikki Haley, of Trump's former cabinet officers did not endorse him this year. That is, his former chief of staff, who was a four-star military officer, and the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs have both called him a fascist. They don't know that he has said he's going to raise prices, up to $4,000 a family with these crazy tariffs. They don't know that stuff because it is not on the Fox News channel and it is not on talk radio. If you've listened to talk radio, right-wing talk radio, it's just a lie. They're just lying to you. But if you are steeped in that world, you do not know it. You believe that that people are eating pets, right? You believe that crap. And so there is disinformation. And there is also that disinformation has enabled the right wing, which are not traditional Republicans. I keep maintaining this. Because I wrote a history of the Republican Party and I know it really well. And one of the reasons that I take what has happened to the Republican Party so personally is that when you spend your life with people, which I have, my whole career has been writing about Republicans, you don't always like what they do, but they feel like family and you can honor the ones who've done the right thing. And I look at these traitors and what they have done to the country under the mantle of the Republican Party, who had Abraham Lincoln and U.S. Grant and James Meredith. And I look at them and it just makes my blood boil. They are not real Republicans. They are radical extremists who managed to take over the Republican Party because of a number of problems it had within it. The same way the same kind of radical extremists took over the Democrats in the 1850s. They are not the real Republican Party. And the Republican Party is going to have to rebuild. Anyway, I look at the fact that people are still backing Trump, and I think the disinformation enabled people who had an R by their name to take over that party and to get put into office, into places like the states, especially after 2010, where they cut people away from voting. They gerrymandered in such incredible ways that they have, way more representation in Congress and in their state houses than they have earned. They have managed to take over the media. They have managed to cow a lot of people. And they have created what is a crisis in our democracy. I don't really believe that half of Americans are Nazis or are fascists. I don't really believe that. I believe that the system has been skewed through disinformation, and our job going forward is going to be to take this country back. Now, people I know are scared about what tomorrow might look like and what the next day will look like and what the next day will look like. So let me walk you through that a little bit. Get out the vote. Do anything you can so that the next day after you can tell your grandchildren that you did all you could, because that is important for all of us, but it also feels really good. I think I wrote last night in the letter, in 13 months, I've been to 32 states, a number for multiple times. I've done all these talks. I've been to one gig after another. I've written a letter every night. And I didn't realize how tired I was until that plane landed in Boston last night. And the weight off my shoulders, I cannot tell you how much better I feel, because there is nothing more that I could have given to this cause. Like, I am not going to wake up on November 6th and say, I wish I'd done more. I have no more to give. And you want to feel the same way. So, this is, again, get the rally tool, show up to turn people out to vote, post on social media what you care about. Tomorrow is the day. This is the day. So put your all into it. You want to wake up on the 6th saying you have done all you can. Help people get to the polls. Do whatever it takes. We have 10,000 people watching right now, almost 11,000. You all turn out, 10 people. That's enough to swing elections, some of which go by as few as 15. 15 votes were settled a bunch of districts in the last election. 15, not 1,500, 15. Every vote matters. Make sure your own vote has been counted. All the voting stuff, right? All that matters. But if there's one thing I can promise you, that no matter what happens tomorrow, and there are lots of things that could happen. Everybody expects that Trump is going to come out and say he won. And my guess is he will, but I think it's going to be half-hearted because he just seems so down and so out of it. I mean, maybe he'll come out fighting, but he's not the same man he was in 2020. And we'll see. Everybody's expecting that he's going to come out and say he won. Don't believe it. The votes will not be counted by tomorrow. It is not possible to count them because Republicans in Pennsylvania, among other places, have made it the law that you can't even open a mail-in ballot until the polls open at 7 o'clock in the morning. It is not physically possible for Pennsylvania to count its ballots, and that's because of laws Republicans have put in place. So what we expect to have happen is this. We expect that, as usual, there will be it will look red early on. There'll be a red mirage, they call it. And then as more mail-in ballots are counted, it will look more like a Democratic win, which is what's happened in the past. But that being said, one of the things that everybody will tell you is that this election is being called a unicorn election and a wild card election. And the reason for that is the other thing that people are watching is trends. And there are two very surprising trends in this election. One is it appears that seniors, people over 65, are voting heavily for Democrats. They almost always vote heavily for Republicans. In this election, they are voting heavily for Democrats. Why does that matter? It matters because they turn out in very high numbers. They're very reliable voters. And it appears that they are furious about the Dobbs decision. And that's men and women both. That's not just older women. That's men and women both, because they feel that they want to hand on to their children and grandchildren the same rights and privileges that they had. That's unusual. We got to flip there. And the other one is a very high number of newly registered voters. Now, again, we don't know how they're going to vote because they've never voted before. And in many states, they're registered as independents. It appears that independents are breaking for Democrats. And the other thing that is different in this election is that women are voting in very much higher numbers so far. We've only had early voting so far than men. And those are all changes. It also suggests that the suburbs, which have been Republican strongholds, have potentially flipped to the Democrats. And I don't mean like every single one of them, but have potentially flipped in that direction. Those are game changers forever. Those are game changers if those three things hold. The other thing you're going to see in a lot of these early voting stuff is how many people have turned out. We do not know how they have voted. Like, for all we know, they have all voted for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, or they have all voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Now, do we really think that it's going to be at that extreme? Absolutely not. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when you see, for example, that this many Republicans have voted, that doesn't mean they voted for Trump and J.D. Vance. We know there's a lot of crossover. We know there's not a lot of crossover on the Democratic side this year. But there is a lot of crossover, or there appears to be a lot of crossover on the Republican side. So we do not know what's going to happen. So when you see these numbers and you're like, oh my God, look at Nevada, which there's two brand new studies out of Nevada. One says Walz and Harris are going to win. One says Vance and Trump are going to win. Don't drive yourself crazy about them. We do not know. All right. So all that being said, it is unlikely that there is going to be any kind of a conclusion by tomorrow night. What I'm going to be watching tomorrow is North Carolina, because if North Carolina goes for Harris and Walz, that's a really big sign. And the fact that their governor, their lieutenant governor who's running for governor, Mark Robinson, so spectacularly melted down with the porn stuff. And the fact that the person running for the head of education, I'm sorry, I'm still tired, is so bad. And she was a January 6th and she's a homeschooler, and she called for, Obama to be executed on pay-per-view. People are not going to turn out for that. That's not helping the down ballot races. So I'm going to be watching North Carolina. I don't expect it to go Democratic. I mean, that's not something that is a make or break. But if it does go Democratic, I'm going to sleep a lot easier. So that's what I'll be watching. And again, we just don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to say anything more than that. But here's what I can tell you, and I can tell you this 100%, that no matter who wins on November 5th, our work, my work anyway, is just beginning. Because what we have done over the past 8 years is we have built the momentum for retaking American democracy and putting in place a lot of measures that should have been in place a long time ago and were stopped by this rise of this radical right. And I don't just mean over the last 10 years. I mean, there's a lot of, imagine if we had really worked on alternative energies in 1980, after Jimmy Carter started it in the 1970s. Imagine where this world would be right now if we had done that. And we're going to have to make those changes regardless of who gets into office. And Harris and Walz will have a lot to do, and there are going to be a lot of changes, and there are going to be a lot of changes that you don't like, that not all of us like. And that's because they should have been happening gradually all along, and they have not been. And so a lot of stuff is going to feel like a wrench. Even things like every time I try and drive to Portland, every single road is under construction, and it's frustrating. But you know what? That's because we didn't do repairs for all those years until we got the bipartisan infrastructure law. That's what things are going to look like in a best case scenario. And then I'm going to be back here saying, find your lane, take your energy, take it forward, work on whatever issues you care about, because this will be the time to shape the future. We will have stopped the takeover of this world by fascists, because if you can control the United States government, you can control the world. But we won't have set the terms for the next era. So the work is going to continue. going forward. And it's going to be exciting work. It's going to be fun work. I'm already, like, I actually sat down and planned something with my manager today that I really hope we can put in place because I will have the freedom to do that. But if everything goes wrong, if in fact Trump and Vance win and the Republicans hold the Senate and the House, the work is not going to stop then either. It's going to be more important than ever. And let me just tell you quickly, you asked me about the Senate and holding the Senate. Terrible map for the Democrats in the Senate this year. Are they going to hold the Senate or not? We'll see. A lot of really tight races. The really bad map for the Republicans is in 2 years. That is absolutely something that's going to be coming up in 2 years. But if everything goes badly, and people are very scared, I know, if everything goes badly, what are we going to do? Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get up and we're going to put one foot in front of the other. And I said to someone the other day, you know, if you think about everything you've been through in your life, if you haven't had a period of your life that you did not think you were going to make it through, you've been very lucky. I think virtually everybody on this call has, or on this Zoom, has had things they did not think they would get through. And for all that I have done, and you know, people are always like, all the books and the letters and all that's great, right? And it's great, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of it. I love the work. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what we've built. What I am proudest of are the times that I kept breathing when it seemed like I would not be able to. And all of you here have been through something like that. Or if you haven't, God bless you. You've had a great life. We will keep breathing. We know how to do this. We didn't know how to do it in 2016. Remember that? We were terrified. I remember being terrified. I didn't know what you did when somebody like that was in power. Now I do. I know who you call. I know who my squad is. I know where the people are. I know how to organize. I know how to push back. We are ready for whatever might come. And if it really does come to the worst and people are hurting and they're being hurt, what I would say to you is nobody wakes up in the morning to become a hero. And I say this all the time, right? Nobody says, here's my moment, I'm going to be a hero. What they do is they do the next right thing. And they do the next right thing no matter how hard it is. And if that means, on the other side of this, not speaking up to get somebody in trouble, or speaking up to protect someone, or if it means pushing back against the rise of authoritarianism in your community, or if it means working together to change laws or standing firm against something, just so you know, you will not be alone. A lot of people are not talking about plans they have already put in place, but you will not be alone. Our job, if in fact the Republicans run the table, or even if Trump is elected in the future, will be simply to do the next right thing, no matter how hard it is. And if the majority of us keep doing the next right thing, we're going to be okay. I hate to say I promise that, but we're going to be okay. So what I would suggest is keep working tomorrow, run for the tape so you can feel good about it. Do not borrow trouble that you can't solve, because you and I don't have any control over what's going to happen in January. But we do have control over what we are doing today. We got to run for that tape, and I will maintain faith that we will do this. Americans have always done it in the past. We have always come through. And I don't mean, only, under certain conditions. Even back in the 1850s, when it was just white men, at the end of the day, we came through and we protected American democracy. And look at where we are. Do you really think that you can take what we have built and stuff it into a bottle? I just don't see how that happens, personally. So I have faith. I have faith in us. I have faith in what we've built. I have faith in all the people working with us. And I have faith that, in our generation, we will turn this country back to the democracy that it should always have been and that it can be in the future. So let's do this. And I'm going to sleep tonight. I'm going to sleep well tonight. And I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to do it all again. I will do a normal thing tomorrow. And I'm sorry. I'm tired. I will do a normal politics chat tomorrow at the normal time, which is, I don't even know, it's 4 o'clock, right? Because of the time change and all that. Um, and if something big happens, I promise you I will be here. Of course, I don't foresee it, but if something big happens, and there's an emergency, you can look for me here. I will be here as soon as I am able if there is an emergency. And let's do this together. Let's go out and celebrate democracy because it is ours and we can do this. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you tomorrow. And with hope, with luck. Oh, one last thing. I just want to say for people who are struggling with addiction, I was just going to say this, with luck will be a time for celebration. People who are struggling with addiction, work with your people. You're going to hear lots of people talking about having a drink or whatever. It doesn't do any favors to anybody. And I'm with you. Just stick with it. I'm not going to celebrate the abuse of things. So this will be a safe place. I will not talk about drinking here. I will not talk about drug use here. And we in this community have your back. So I was going to say, with luck, we will be celebrating, but I'm going to be celebrating with, well, I've got seltzer water here, Diet Coke, or whatever, Diet Pepsi, and you can feel safe here. So talk to your people. If you're on edge, don't let this election become a personal trauma for you. My public service announcement. I get tired of seeing all the celebrations of people saying, hey, what are you drinking? Because I know that's really hard on a lot of people. Anyway, thank you for being here, and I will see you tomorrow. And with luck, we will be celebrating. Talk to you soon.